I'm going to first start off with some introductions for everyone. I'm Mr. J. Since we have two Mr. Justins in the school, and I'm just known as Mr. J. I teach 6, 7, 8, and 10. First, to introduce the teachers that we have here. This is Miss Erica. And Miss Erica is teaching grades 6, 7, 8, 9 in language and literature. Mr. Seth is with us. He's teaching language acquisition in grades 6, 9, and 10. Who's not with us at the moment is in their classrooms are Mr. Aaron, our EAL teacher, teaching all the grades in EAL, and also Miss Miriam, which is teaching 7 and 9 for language acquisition and language and literature at grade 10. Right? And now Miss Erica will come up and.
Last year we kind of focused more on what is language development and the benefits of being bilingual. But this year we're focusing more on strategies to implement at home for language development. So this year we're focusing more on practical strategies. We hope that through the presentation you can understand that language acquisition takes a lot of time. And also it's really driven by interest. If a student isn't bought into the process, it's going to take a little bit slower. And we hope that you're able to support your child's language development outside of school. So you might be thinking, why English? Well, you send your student to an international school to open up the doors for opportunities, not only for university, for studying abroad, but also for future employment. It's also widely understood that being bilingual creates more critical thinking skills and also creates more empathetic learners and individuals later in life. And in the short term, KISRP, our language of instruction, is English. So we want students to be successful. Last year, we went in depth on the benefits of bilingualism, but I just want to remind everyone about those benefits. Of course, some benefits are, well, you can talk to more people. You can understand what they're saying on the TV or on the radio. You can watch more content on social media. I mean, that's a benefit for our students, maybe not for us. But there are also some benefits of being bilingual that you might not think of immediately. For example, seeing and using information in new ways. Not only are our bilingual students able to communicate with more people, but they're also better problem solvers. It also improves mental flexibility and can even ward off dementia in old age, which is something I'm interested in. Too bad I'm not bilingual.
So a couple of things to remember when we talk about learning or acquiring a new language. It does take time. So we have a benchmark as academic language takes from 5 to 7 years, and that's under certain ideal circumstances. Newer research is coming out that says, 10 years is also a pretty common amount of time. And as students get older, the expectations for that level of English get more challenging. So children who start later during their English learning might take a little bit longer to kind of catch up to some of their native English-speaking peers. The good news is students with strong first language skills relatively quickly develop strong second language skills. So being able to read and write well in your home language will lead to a student who can read and write well in another language. Things that will slow the process, things like negative stress, pressure, that feeling that I must catch up now or feeling inadequate, it doesn't help the process of learning. In fact, it slows it down pretty significantly. But there are ways to help at home. So, turn and talk. How did you acquire a second language for anyone who has one? So, yeah, that experience can help shed some light on.
And I think it's interesting that you mentioned that, it's so different for every person. I think it's the same no matter what you're learning. Every child, every adult, everyone has a different experience. Because we have a lot of students who come to the school who have low proficiency in English. And you said that immersion helped you develop your English faster. But I think oftentimes it makes children oftentimes students have a freeze reaction where they have a silent period where they don't speak at all and they're just absorbing. And that can last anywhere from 1 to 2 years sometimes. So it's really interesting how everyone approaches it differently. I'm always really interested in polyglots, people who know, like, they're fluent in 9 languages. And I'm not bilingual myself. So I'm really interested in researching the process of acquiring another language. And I came across this TED Talk, and I thought we'd just watch a few minutes of it. It's from Dr. Makova, and she's fluent in 9 languages. She's also a PhD in translation studies. And this TED Talk title kind of grabbed my attention.
It's available to anyone who's willing to take the learning into their own hands.
So something that stuck out to me in that video was whenever she noticed it was important to take the learning into their own hands. In school, we provide a lot of that extrinsic pressure and the extrinsic motivation. So, we connect it to grades and feedback and positive pressure in school to succeed. However, whenever you move to the home space, you don't give your kid grades. So how do you develop that initiative and that intrinsic motivation to develop language there? Here at school, I did want to briefly go over the ways that we support language here. We do give every language learner the WIDA test at the end of the school year to measure growth. That data gives us 4 points: reading, listening, speaking, writing, and also an overall score. We use that data to place students in similar language proficiency groups in order to teach foundational language skills. Like Tom said, if you're in an immersive environment, you can't succeed unless you have the basics. You're gonna drown. So we make sure that students do have the basics. We also focus on academic vocabulary, from the phase where students don't have a lot of English to students who have mastered the English language. We're always teaching vocabulary. We give students regular feedback through grades and written comments. And also we also encourage them to practice IXL, to build the foundational skills, and we implement daily reading and language habits. However, whenever you go home, it's all about the initiative from the student, that intrinsic motivation. So today we put together some strategies for parents to foster that, to fire it up. And we like to put these strategies in 3 categories, or LRP: listen, read, and play. So like Tom mentioned, he listened to the news, and I think that's a common strategy for language learners to use. We have a lot of opportunities for students to listen in English, no matter their proficiency. Over here, I have some resources for developing language for lower proficiency students. If you have a gamer at home and they can't stop playing Minecraft, then maybe you might want to point them towards English from the Ground Up, in which English teachers are commenting on Minecraft gameplay. Now you might be thinking, I don't really want my students to be watching Minecraft. What are they going to learn from that? Any comprehensible input is going to build their vocabulary and develop their proficiency. Obviously, Netflix and Hulu and Disney Plus, they offer lots of entry points into listening to English. We recommend for beginners to use subtitles to increase comprehension, but as students learn more, to take away those subtitles to focus on those close listening skills. We also have a great audiobook resource library paid for by the school that your students can access. It's called Sora, and I actually use this because I like listening to my favorite books from childhood on audiobook, because I think they're the best audiobooks. They really are great models for intonation and how to make reading come alive. So I just finished A Wrinkle in Time and Bridge to Terabithia through Sora, and students can access that on their phones. You can also access it, and maybe you guys listen to the same book together and talk about it. This gives a great entry point for authentic discussion skills. Over on the other side of the screen, we have some resources for students who are mastering the language. A lot of our students, listening is one of their stronger skills overall. But whenever it comes to academic language, that's where students start to struggle. So having students watch TED-Ed videos or listen to the news radio, this will help increase their vocabulary and their comprehension.
Alrighty, thank you. So I volunteered to present this part because I'm very passionate about this. So benefits of reading, and which Mr. Tom, you mentioned that was the main method that you were using was the newspaper, right? Well, that's very important. So I think you even mentioned something about the vocabulary, all the vocabulary that you learned from there. So many benefits to reading. First, you're going to see the vocabulary again and again and again. Again, the most common words will be, you're going to have that input. But you're also going to be exposed to words that are not common than the normal speaking, right? Normal conversations that we have day to day. And that's going to really be able to increase your vocabulary there. Definitely your grammar improves. Even with some of my students, if I see that they're having a problem with their sentence structure, I gave one of my students that advice. I said, you need to start reading every single day. When you see the reading and you see really good examples of the best authors and the best writers, you're absorbing that. And the input equals your output. So if you're seeing as you say, you're reading the newspaper every day, those are great writers, right? The professional writers. So if you see that, when your speech and your writing comes out, that's going to be based on them, the examples that you've seen, which is the best examples. So everyday reading. Of course, they're going to get better reading comprehension. But what a lot of people don't emphasize is that it's not just your reading comprehension that increases, it's your writing skills and your speaking skills are really improved. The best students that I've ever had have been students. And I said, you read a lot, right? Yeah, I read every day. Well, there you go. There you go. Because your writing shows it, your vocabulary is amazing, and you're speaking. And there's another benefit that, again, a lot of people don't speak about. I think it's imagination. When you're staring at a phone, right, or any kind of screen, television, before then it was television, we spent too much time on. Now it's the phones. You're taking someone else's images, someone else's ideas, and that's your input, that's what you're seeing. But here, when you're reading, you're taking that author's words and you're creating the pictures in your own mind. And this is strengthening your imagination. Strengthening your mind, I believe really strengthening your mind as well. Okay, some of the resources that we have here, and the one Erica mentioned, the one Sora. So not only can you listen to audiobooks, you can also you can also read all kinds of books, and the students seem to really enjoy this website. Concord Infinity is our library app that we can see what books are present in the library at this time. And then Newsella, very good. Again, coming back to the news and the newspapers, Newsella is great because not only will it ask you questions, you'll read an article about current things that kids would be interested in, but also you can choose the level of the reading. They'll usually have something like at least 3, sometimes as many as 5 different levels of the same article. So it becomes accessible to all the students at whatever level that they're at. Okay, so there's a couple of different ways. So a big question for parents might be, how can I choose the right book for my child? And there are a few different ways, but honestly, I really feel very passionately that the number one thing is, does the student like it? Do they like it? I would prefer that they read something that they really enjoy and they can't wait to read than to, and that's not really under their level, than to have them read something that, somebody thinks is a good book, but they think it's boring, right? It's only good if they have the enthusiasm for it and they put a lot of work and effort into it, and they're going to put a lot of work and effort into something that they really enjoy. So number one is that they like the subject matter. Then once the student feels really passionate about reading and gets that habit with reading, I think you should consider things like Lexile level, and this is really optimizing where it needs to be. We just finished the MAP testing, and the MAP testing is going to give a score something like this. It'll be something like that. Every student has their own level. So it's the level of the student's reading ability, and it's the level of the books, right? So again, it's not an exact science, right? As I said, the number one thing is, does the student like it? They pick up a book and they go, oh, I really want to read this. And you say, well, you're a 680 and this is a 1,100, It really depends. They should try it out, and if they get frustrated, then maybe come back to that book later on in the year when they've grown a little more. but I don't want the Lexile to be the main determining factor that they use. This is the more a more simple method. Again, it's not an exact science, but the rule of 5. So in general, you can say you read a page in a book. You pick up a book. You say, "Oh, this book looks interesting." You look at the book and you say, "Oh," you read through the page. If you don't have any words that you don't know, it's probably too low, probably too easy for you. Again, if you like it, still go ahead and read it. I think it's still good. And if you have more than 5, that's going to be very frustrating. That's going to be very frustrating. And even though you might like the content, you might get a little bit. It's just not going to be a little bit too much for you at the time. But around 5 is just like the sweet spot. Around 4 or 5 words that you need to learn. So it's not too easy and not too hard. But as I said, that's just a consideration of once the passion for reading is there, once the habit for reading is there, then you can worry about these things and to really optimize the best class. Yes, sir.
The Lexile scores, is there any correlation with how the library is organized with the Lexile scores in terms of, like, as a parent, how do I know these books are around a 600, these are 800, and these are the more difficult ones?
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure about the organization that we have right now. The only ones I'm sure of what they are organized within Lexile is are the readers. There's one section when you come in right to the left that have some graded readers. And they go up in levels. For sure that is graded. Does anyone else know if they're I think they're rated by more subject matter or authors? Or
By genre.
Genre first. And then. So, but the way to find that out is really honestly just do a search real quick. Just do a quick Google search, but Lexile of The Giver or whatever, and it'll come up. It'll just come up on it'll easily come up. So there's a couple things. Just open it and do the rule of 5. Search it real quick. I'm sure the librarian or anybody in there would be more than happy to help out with that. All right, and now pass it off to Seth. There you go.
So listening and reading are always the kind of go-to things that we suggest for parents, and sometimes though they need that little extra motivation of that fun piece. And while I love reading and reading is super fun, sometimes it helps to have a little bit more social interaction too. So things like board games can be really helpful. A lot of games in the English language are based on vocabulary, right? And Scrabble is one of the most popular games in the world, and it's just a spelling game, right? So these games they're accessible, they're everywhere. You can probably find an app for most of them if you can't find the actual board game. There's also dozens of language learning apps and websites. Duolingo does a very good job gamifying things. Quizlet helps you build vocabulary from creating flashcards and studying that way. Speech Ace is this really fun pronunciation website where you speak into the website and it tells you, yeah, you missed this specific sound in the way you said this word. And GamesToLearnEnglish.com has a lot of variety of fun little games to kind of practice some of that language learning skills. Then, again, some more of those kind of family and friends games that are pretty popular worldwide. Group games like Story Dice, that's a really fun one where you can choose, I think, from 3 to 7 different dice. And this website will roll the dice and you have to create a story based on what the dice show. So that can be a fun way to hang out with friends. Alibi games and murder mysteries where you're kind of playing a character. Werewolf games where you have to guess who's the wolf and who's not. And so all of these games can help kids or adults enjoy the language learning process. And of course, you have to mention the idea of playing video games. It's very popular. And these can help with some of that high interest vocabulary. You do need to be aware of which games your children are playing because some of them may expose the kids to vocabulary you're you don't want them to learn. And especially those online games where there is human interaction, that's another way that you might need to exercise some caution with your kids. But those games do get their attention, and it keeps them, engaged with some of those specific topics that'll build that interest. Okay, the next question. Do you think using your first language at home can help your child learn a second language? Happen at home. So one of the things that can happen in international schools where the student is learning in English, but at home they're speaking another language, some of their knowledge and understanding only comes in English. So if you're learning certain concepts in science or math or whichever subject, you might know them very well in English, but you don't even know them in your first language. And that's a thing that we'd like to produce kids who can do things in multiple languages, right? So discussing some of those things in your first language with your child, using rich vocabulary, right? Don't be shy about using words you think they might not understand. Because there's a chance that they've learned those words and concepts in English, but that's something that's missing in their first language. Talk about the world, right? Talk about your day, your thoughts and opinions, because those kinds of interactions, building that relationship with your child can also be part of their motivation, right? They enjoy spending time with you, talking with you, and understanding the world through your point of view, right? So that can also lead to some of that motivation as well. Talking about schoolwork, and then when you get to more complex ideas, sometimes it helps to slow down, right? So if you're discussing something that you've seen in the news that may be a little bit challenging, especially for kids who are, middle school, high school aged, don't expect them to be really quick with those answers. Give them 5 or 10 seconds to think about what they want to say. That kind of helps them feel comfortable and prepare their ideas. Also, modeling good reading habits and keeping a lot of books in the house. There's a lot of evidence that just having books leads to kids becoming good readers. So if you can show them that reading is an important part of regular life, whether it's the newspaper, a novel, even articles online that you're reading, kind of share those ideas. And with younger kids especially, but also even some older kids, read them a book. I believe last year we heard that more than half of high school students responded that they wish their parents would still read stories to them. So, don't be afraid of treating your growing children as though they are still, your little kids. And make sure that you are focused on the effort that they're making, right? Because learning a language is a process. It's not about the end goal. It's about the daily steps you can take to reach that goal. So if we're praising them for making those steps and following those routines, then we'll be more likely to see them succeed in the end. So a couple of other things that can help: building routines, for example, reading and homework routines. These are just good for general school success. But if you do have 20 minutes a day that your child knows, okay, after this, it's reading time, and then I do homework, or maybe after that I have some free time. And also making sure if you do have homework time for your kid, that it's in a quiet place where they don't have distractions. If you send them into their bedroom where they have toys or phones or access to other things that can be a little more fun than homework, it might not be the most successful situation. Other things that can help: having them keep a journal, right? You don't have to read it. In fact, it's ideal if you don't. But that way they can build some of those skills of writing and kind of getting their ideas down, because writing is a form of thinking. Writing is like a physical representation of how our brains work. So some of those kids will have really well organized ideas. Some of them you'll see scratched out things and maybe there'll be drawings in the middle of it. Maybe they're switching between languages in the middle of their writing, but it's a really fascinating way for them to practice using those parts of their brain. And when they are studying new concepts, learning new things in school that they've never learned in any language, if you do have a little bit of understanding of those, talking about them in your home language together can help reinforce what they're learning in school and help them understand those same concepts in their home language. So I believe that is all we had for today.